Today on the bench we have an Ingersoll-Rand 231G half-inch air impact. The customer says it's leaking air. Let's check it out and see what we can find. I don't know if you can see this, but the outlet here where the muffler is covered in oil, and so is my hand where I was holding the hose underneath it. So that's one problem, but I'm guessing because this was running without the trigger being pulled, there's a problem with the throttle body or the throttle valve, and probably some gaskets too. I haven't taken one of these apart before, so we're learning as we go. This is interesting because this screw that holds the hammer housing on, it also holds the trigger on. So as I remove this, note how that angle piece is going up inside the top of the trigger, and the trigger just pulls out. That's a very different design than the newer models they have, where there's a hook on the end of that trigger that hooks onto the throttle valve. So this will give us something new and interesting to look at. I don't know if this rubber grip has to come off, but it's already doing a great job of working its way off, so we'll just take it the rest of the way. That way it'll uncover anything that we may need to get to. And inside here, it's covered in oil. And so is the grip. All the oil covering it here. You know, here's your exhaust screen here, and your muffler in there. That's just some sound deadening material they put in there. So that piece that came out is the inlet bushing. You can see through there is a, I don't know if you can see the screen, but there's a filter screen in there, and the air fitting screws in to the female piece there. That should not have been that difficult to get out, but it was, and who knows when the last time this thing was taken apart. So that's out, and now we can access everything in here that we need to access. This here is a baffle, or what they call the silencer, and then sitting in here is the throttle valve spring, and then on top of that sits the throttle valve, and then the throttle valve goes into the throttle seat, or the throttle valve seat. So there should be a few pieces in here that we pull out. There's the spring. There's the throttle valve. There should be the throttle valve seat up there too. I can't find it. Can you see it? Probably not. I don't know. We'll keep poking around and see what we can find. While we're here, we'll take the rotor started working its way out, so we'll just take that out just to make it easier to handle the body. And that just pulls out. And then these guys here are the vanes. That's what the air catches to make the whole rotor or the motor spin. And if I'm not careful, those are all going to fall out. So now the body's empty. Back there is a bunch of old nasty grease, but the body itself looks rather good. The valve seat's in there, but man, that thing was mashed up. It's coming out in pieces. This guy doesn't want to come out. This impact has been fighting me all the way. I don't know why. Doesn't respond to love. Compassion and kindness will overcome its stubbornness. I don't know why this thing is so difficult, but geez Louise. All right, so here's the valve seat. And it's all crumbled away. There you go. Well, no wonder air's getting by. All right, so it looks like what we're going to do is get a new valve seat. It looks like the valve's okay. I mean, there's really not a whole lot there that can go wrong. It's just a... There you go. It's just it's an all metal piece, so there's nothing to wear on it. The spring looks good. We might get a new silencer because that looks like junk. So far, it looks like it's just a valve seat that's the problem. But while we've got it apart, we'll go through the rest of it and see what's going on. So with the hammer assembly here, this is fairly straightforward. The whole hammer assembly just drops out of the nose here. Here's your anvil. This is, there are component parts to the hammer assembly here, but let's see what's what. These are the hammers, this guy and this guy. And there's 2 pins that hold everything in here. It actually looks rather good. The grease in here doesn't look old and nasty and full of dirt. A lot of times the grease will be full of grit. And it's gummy, but not this stuff. This stuff looks like it's pretty good. Then you pull the anvil out like that, and then the hammers just drop out of the cage into your hand. There's 1 hammer, 2 hammers. Not much to them. So I'm just inspecting everything to make sure there's no visible problems with anything. Everything else looks pretty good. I mean, even the inside of that looks nice. So what I like to do for everything that comes in on the bench, I like to go through the whole thing, thoroughly clean it and re-lubricate it. You know, and I don't really charge for more than an hour worth of bench time anyway, but I have my pride. I want stuff to leave in better condition than it came in, obviously, and not just the stuff that I worked on. I want to be able to see if there's any other issues or troubles, and I want to return the tool to the customer better than when he got it. So it'll be cleaned up, re-lubricated, and all the worn parts will be replaced. Our parts came in, so we're going to head over to the parts washer and wash and degrease all components. All the parts have been washed, and I took it out to the compressor and blew them all dry, so we are ready to start reassembly. We will do first a part that we came here to fix and put the valve seat, the valve, and the valve spring back in the handle. I'm not exactly sure which way the valve seat has to go because there's 2 ends. There's that end there, and there's that end which has more of the rubber covering is wider here than on that end. I believe, based on only my supposition, that it goes with the wider portion up against the valve like that. Because what happens is the trigger, the trigger hits the valve stem. When you pull the trigger presses this guy and rocks it against the valve seat, and when it does that, it opens a gap like that or like that, and when the gap is there, that's when the air comes through. So I believe it's got to go with that, with the wider side of the valve seat up against the valve, but we'll try it, and if it's wrong, we'll go back in and change it. So this goes in first then, with this side going up into, the thinner side here going up into the housing. And the valve just drops in there, I believe. And then the valve spring goes up against it all like that. The silencer goes in. The diffuser goes over the whole thing. And then whatever they call this piece. I don't know. The thing. Alright, well, we'll tighten that down later, but that's, well, it's good for now. If I tighten it down now, I'm just going to have to pick up the camera and walk over there, and I'm too lazy because it's getting late. Okay, next we're going to put the motor assembly back together. And I'm cheating off of, I got the schematic here. I'm just not familiar enough with this model to know it by heart, so I'm going to be cheating off the schematic as we go. I did not fully disassemble this. Shame on me. I should have done it because I'm a big believer in doing that. And I simply don't see what the reason would be for having to disassemble this. There's an E-ring or an E-clip here, and honestly I hate these things because I don't have a good way of undoing them unless you wrangle with a screwdriver and a pair of pliers. There's a bearing underneath it, and that goes up against this plate that the rotor spins against. This didn't look like there was any damage. It looked like I could clean everything perfectly well without disassembling it. So I left it as it is. And I can't imagine that would be a problem, but that has bitten me before. This time I'm confident. So we're going to go ahead and lie to myself and believe that that's all true. This gasket goes on the back of this guy here. And then it goes in the housing, I believe. No. Nope, not yet. There's the sleeve here. And how this goes in is important. I just don't know which way that is. There's that side and that side. This has some letters on it. This is an R here, and this is an SR here, and I don't know what that stands for. I should have been paying more attention when I removed it. Lucky for me, I'm pretty sure there's a top because there's a hole there. And there's a hole in the housing there. I'm guessing those line up because there's a long pin that goes through it all to hold it in place. So I'm confident about that part. What I don't know is if it matters if that face is in or if that face is in. I don't see any real difference. Except that next to the R here, where is it? Next to the R here, it's a little, can you see that? This, golly. That right there, that's a little nub. I don't know what that's for. I don't know if something goes in that. I don't know if that rests up against something. So let's take a sec and see what we got here. I'm looking on the schematic to see if it gives me any indication. And it doesn't, of course. Why would it? I could review the video that I shot when I disassembled it and see if I caught it on camera. Or I could just wing it. Alright, this is like a choose your own adventure. Who votes for me reviewing the video? Okay, now who votes for me winging it? I'm with you, I'm going to wing it. Good suggestion. How bad could it be, right? As I look to see what this is the piece that mates up with that. And there's nothing on there that indicates to me that it matters. I also don't see anything in the housing here which tells me it matters. Let's test fit it and see if anything gives me a clue. That's a tight fit. Man, don't even touch these surfaces together. You're committed. That sleeve's a tight fit. If I put it in there, I'm committing myself to something. Alright, I'm going to review the video. After I reviewed things, the lettering here goes toward the front of the unit. So this sleeve is going to go in like this with the letter side facing out. But that's a really tight fit. So what we're gonna do is use some oil on this. I'm not gonna use a grease. I don't like putting grease near the rotor assembly because it needs a lighter oil. So we'll see if that helps us get it in. And I'm just hoping I get this lined up right. We're going to take the pin that goes in there. We're going to see if that can help us locate that now. And that will help. I just got to move this a little bit clockwise. There we go. And everything drops in pretty easily. I hope I don't have to take that back out. I'm just playing around with this because it looks funny in there because it's, and again, I'm not that familiar, so I don't know. You tell me. Everything's kind of off center, and I'm sure it's supposed to be, or it wouldn't fit, but it just looks goofy. So I'm just kind of playing around just to see what I can discover. maybe why they do it that way. I don't know. It's kind of weird. And with the pin in there, it's not like this is going to move. So it's not like that's going to redirect air. I don't know. That's a new one on me. The rotor goes in next. Was this supposed to go in front of that piece? Oh, that would bum me out if it was. Something's very weird here. Something's very strange. Oh, man. Oh, son of a bitch. Next, the motor housing is going to go in. And there's a few things we got to keep in mind on this one. There's a gasket here that goes behind the plate, behind the motor. And this drops in, and then this sleeve drops over that. So we're going to lubricate the bearing here with some grease. And when we put this stuff in, there's an alignment hole in all the pieces that go in here because of this hole back here. It's on the rear of the motor housing. So all these holes have to line up because then we drop that pin in there. So this gasket goes in next. And then the motor goes in. I'm gonna keep this all lubed up here because there's a very tight fit between the motor and the sleeve that go in this housing. So I want to keep it lubed up for ease of putting it in. If we got to take it out again, we can hopefully get it out without too much problem. But man, you got to be careful to get this in without putting it cockeyed. And it may just help to drop that pin in to help line everything up. So we're going to do that. Because there's just such little room in here, I don't think that we'll be able to move stuff around too much if things don't line up. This is probably nothing more than the manufacturer's way of testing your patience. And just to show you how how little room for error you have. It's like a millimeter higher here than here, and it won't go in. You really have to have this thing level to get it in there. Holy moly, they make you work for it. This design does. So that I don't swear at you and save you the hassle of watching this, I'm going to take this over to the vise. Be right back. I stopped and started a few times trying to figure out the order of operations on getting this thing back together again, and it's a kind of a mystery, but I think I figured it out. There's some very... Once again, I stopped and started a bunch of times trying to figure out the order of operations on this, and the thing that frustrates me is that there's some extremely tight tolerances between the inside of this housing, this plate around the motor, and the sleeve. If you start anything in here, then there's no room to work. And it's even too tight to insert this stuff properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat the housing a little bit, see if I can get it to expand enough to drop this stuff in a little cleaner than it's been going in. What I'll do first is apply some lubricant to everything. It shouldn't get so hot that will adversely affect it. I don't know. Maybe it will. Don't listen to me. I'm not making any sense. Or am I making too much sense? Yeah, I don't know. I'm punchy. It's late. I'm scrambling to get this done. Alright, just so we don't screw this up. The order is this. I'm going to heat this. Drop in the gasket. And drop in the pin. Then the motor goes in. And then the sleeve goes in. In that order. Alright, I think so. Alright, let's try this again. There's got to be a joke. There's got to be a way to start this stupid torch. This is a torch from Master. I like the torch, but they must, I don't know. You can have 4 hands to start this stupid thing. I must be doing something wrong. I don't know. Maybe I'm tired. I know I'm tired. I just don't know what's going on right now. Oh, man. Why are the simple things so difficult right now? Oh, jeepers creepers. That shouldn't be that difficult, yet it is. Now, if my rudimentary understanding of thermodynamics means anything, it shouldn't need a whole lot of heat. So we'll see. Gasket goes in first. And then the pin. And then the motor assembly. Then again, maybe not the pin. And then I screw up the gasket. And then go back in and fix the gasket. I mean, that goes in way easier with the heat than it did without it, I'll tell you that. A little bit of heat goes a long way. Now the pin, and hopefully that hole lined up right. If it didn't, I hope there's room enough to manipulate the motor so that it does line up correctly. I can't quite tell. Yet there's no real way for me to know. I don't know. I think it did. Anyway, let's see if the sleeve goes in. And the letters go out. That slides in very nicely. And as far as I know, there's no gasket that goes between these, and this just slides in there and goes to the pin, like that. I think. So far I don't have any extra parts, so we're doing something right. I don't know. This washer goes in and there's a machined cut right there, and that goes down against the bearing here. Like that. And then there's not one but two of these metal rings. I don't know if they're gaskets or what. And you can see that they're slightly convex. I don't know if you can see that on here. That's the convex half, that's the concave surface. Convex, concave. This is the same. They nest together. I don't know why they just don't make one. That's that thickness if they need two. And these go in with the convex side against the motor housing. I believe that is all set as it is. We put that aside. Now we put together the hammer assembly. Here's the hammer cage. Here's the hammer housing. Two hammers. And the pins. Oh, back up a tick. I'm gonna have to edit this because I'm an idiot. Motor's not going to work if I don't put the vanes in. Now that the rotor is all set, the vanes have to go in. And the way the vanes go in, they have to be oriented correctly here. There's a square notch on one end, there's an angle on the other, and then there's a long flat surface here. The long flat surface goes against the face of the sleeve because this conforms to the bottom of the slot for the vane, and the square cut comes out. So they go in like that. You just drop them in, advance it one space, and just keep dropping them in. A little bit of oil goes a long way on this. The owners should be oiling this regularly, but they often don't. So I'm going to put just a few drops of oil in here. If you over oil the rotor and the vanes, you can create too much surface tension and the vanes don't move out of their slots like they should. So just a little bit of oil is all you really need. It's enough when you're using the tool to displace water that collects in here because you're using compressed air. And it lubricates it, obviously. So just throw a little bit of oil in, move everything around to work it through. And then we continue. That part is done. We put that aside, and now we're going to put together the hammer assembly. So the hammer housing comes out. Not yet. The hammer cage comes out. And the two hammers. These, as you've heard me say in my other videos maybe, these look like little ghosts. They're adorable. See, they got the two arms in the air and the head go, woo, woo, I'm a ghost of Ingersoll-Rand. I don't know if this is Ingersoll. Oh, maybe one's Ingersoll and one's Rand. They're dead, right? I don't know. The way you orient these are the arms of one ghost go up on one hammer, and then the arms on the ghost of the other hammer go down, and you just put these together like that. And then put them in sideways in the cage, like so. Then you drop in these two pins. And just play around with the position of the hammers until the pin drops all the way through. Now we're going to lubricate the surfaces here. Be careful, do not pick this straight up, because if you do, the pins will just pass through, drop out, and then everything falls apart. So when you move this, move it to the side like that. So we'll put some grease on the face of the hammers and the face of the hammer cage. And like the rotor, I don't like to over lubricate because the potential for this to get dirty and gummy is very high. So I lost a pin there, so just be careful when you do that. Now you got to wrangle with the hammers again. And the owner should be regularly greasing this anyway using the Zerk in the housing. So I don't want to put too much grease on. And now the anvil goes in through this end. And we'll grease the anvil up. And there's no wrong way to do this. You just keep twisting it until it drops in. I'm just double checking to see if I'm forgetting anything. There is a gasket here, and this ring here, and I gotta review where these go in. This gasket just goes on the outside of the hammer housing here, and then this ring, notice how it's stepped. The smaller diameter goes inside and just presses in there and holds the gasket in place. Now this part's complete. I'm going to see if I got this right. I question what I did here. So let's see if this all fits. Yeah, it doesn't. See, what I was questioning was I think this whole housing sets up too high here. I think all this stuff needs to be a little lower in the housing. So I don't know. It just dropped in and stopped on its own. Let's see what I screwed up. Well, I'll never move it unless I heat it up again, so more heat to the rescue. There it is. All right, well, you know, it's a learning curve with this one because it's so new to me. All right, that ought to do it. So now, the pin. And hope this is aligned. We're praying right now because I'm not so sure that it is anymore. Luckily, it can move, so there's still enough heat there. It doesn't seem like that lined up right because wherever that hole is, it's moving past it. So we're just going to wangle it around here until the pin drops in. Where did that hole go? It was there before. I'm kind of hoping that just drops in there, but it doesn't. There it is. And now this plate here, line that up with the pin. It's in. Our spring washers, or whatever they call these, I don't know. They're on there. The washer, cut side, whoops. Cut side against the bearing. Now that part's all set. Now, I think before we get this part set up, the trigger goes in with this little bracket. Good Lord. It's kind of a weird setup, but I'm just trying to make sure this goes in the right place. Well, I'm an idiot. Yeah. But you already know that if you've watched this video. Alright, I think the hammer housing goes on now, and then we futz with that in a second. So I think this goes like this. I think this bracket goes over the screw that sits in here, and then we have to tighten up the whole valve assembly in order for the valve stem to position properly. So I think what we can do now is put the 2 screws in here, tighten that up, and then set the trigger in there with its screw with the bracket. There is a bit of a gap there. I don't know if that's supposed to be there or not. Did I screw something else up? Or does that gap go away when I tighten that down because of the spring washer? We're going to tighten this next, drive that all the way in, and seat that the valve all the way so that we can put the trigger on and then tighten down the hammer housing. And I left my 1/2-inch drive sockets in the garage, but I do have a 1/2-inch breaker bar, so we'll use that. It's what I used to take this thing off with. It was such a bear to get off. While we're doing that, I'm just going to hold the deflector in place. Now with that in place, this whole assembly should have all the tension on it needs. That spring is going to be compressed, and it should have the valve stem should be in place for the trigger to press against it when we put the trigger back in. There is no tension against the trigger. This has me confused. Well, let's pull it and check it out. I'll do that without you. The only thing I can think of is that the valve seat has not settled into position, so let's see if we can give it a nudge without breaking it. Well, it looks like the spring comes to the same level it did before, so I don't think I gained anything there. I'm going to try to take out the valve seat and see if something's up with that. I don't know. There are no promises on this one. I mean, it may be that it's in the correct place, and I can't. I'm concerned about damaging it, so I don't want to get in there too aggressively, but let me fidget absentmindedly while I ponder this. The edge of the valve seat is right here. So if I measure that, yeah, the valve seat's there, and then the valve is going to sit there. That's nowhere near where it needs to be. So I think the valve seat is not down as far as it needs to go. And I don't really know how to budge that from where it is. I'm trying to see if I can get this pick down beyond the far edge and see if I can lift it to get some more movement out of it, but I don't know. Well, the good news is I got the valve seat loose accidentally, so that's a step in the right direction as we try to see what's going on here. And now I'm getting very discouraged because I might have chunked off a piece of the valve seat. It's getting held up. There's female threads in there that threaded piece goes into, and the valve seat is getting hung up on the threads. So this is a exercise in frustration, and it popped out. Doesn't look worse for wear, so maybe I got lucky there. Who invented this? Crying out loud. It's about the dumbest way to make an impact tool. I'm just trying to get an idea of where this has to go and how far off I am. This is to the point of the pick goes to the trigger hole, and that's from the handle. We'll put a little bit of grease on that, see if we can help it along. And try to make sure we're keeping it nice and even so I don't get it cockeyed in there. Alright, it kind of just floated back down there on its own until it has come to rest. And it looks, to the unaided eye, that is resting in the same place as it was before. I had to go back and look at the video of when I took this thing apart to see if I get any clues. There is nothing on the internet that I can find, so we're on the verge of making a unique resource because I can't find information on this anywhere. This valve seat is more complex than what meets the eye. And there's some subtleties to this that are very important. One of them is, as we mentioned before, they're not symmetrical. That's a much wider area of contact there than on this other side, and if you look carefully inside, you can see how even the diameter on one end of the metal liner is different than the other. It chokes down. And when I took an inspection light and shined it down into the handle, I can see about this far down, it also chokes down a little bit. What I believe I have to do, and I dread to say it, it's a one-way trip. It has to, I believe I had this upside down. So I have to put it in the other way around, where the metal insert on here is narrower on this end. And if I drop it in there, I believe I have to press it down, and then this plastic sleeve will compress a little bit, and this should go down and seat all the way. And then the valve goes in like that, and this is upside down, so we're inverted here. And then the valve goes in like that and rests up against here, and with the spring providing tension, that should be enough to seal that so the air doesn't get by. I'm skeptical, but I've got nothing else to think at this point. In a worst case scenario, I'm going to ruin the valve seat and I just get another one. So that's what I'm looking at doing. So as far as I can understand, that's what's got to go on here. The valve seat has to go on this end first. I'm gonna force it down until it rests up against a shoulder that is in the handle there. Because there's a considerable gap when I had this in there before between the end of the seat and the shoulder that it has to rest up against. So, here goes nothing. We'll put little more lube on it just to help the cause here. Just going to send that bad boy home and see what happens. We'll push it down with a punch. Looks like it still has a ways to go, so we might have to use a little more persuasion here. We'll try tapping it with a hammer. I think I just felt it get kind of solid. If it's not, it's getting closer for sure. I'm going to check to see if there's still a gap between the shoulder in the handle and the valve seat. I'm having a hard time getting the pick through the valve seat, which means it's getting narrower, which is what we want because it's going to have to in order to bottom out there. So we'll keep at it here, gently punching it down. It's making progress. I just can't tell if it's reached its limit yet. I'm going to put this in the vise just to add a little stability to it so it'll sit tight. The vise added a lot of stability. I felt the valve seat move quite a bit. So I think it bottomed out. Now we're going to drop the valve in there to see if we can see the stem through the trigger hole. Yeah, we can. So looks like that's in far enough. We'll now take the spring, drop that in, and then we'll screw on the piece in the bottom. That'll add tension to the spring, and that should give us the needed resistance for the trigger. That's back on there, so the trigger should set in there nicely now. And I should feel resistance against the valve, and I do. See it spring back like it should. We'll put the bracket in there and put that last screw on. And because there's a gasket, and you should do this anytime you're dealing with a gasket, when you screw down a surface against the gasket, don't crank down one end until it's tight and then go to the other. Go a little bit at a time on each surface because you have to try to compress that gasket as evenly as possible. So go around in a pattern like this and just keep going around. Tightening a little bit at a time. And I was correct. Tightening all that down has removed the gap between the hammer housing and the motor housing. So now I'll tighten it down real good. That feels all right. Put the fitting back in and the handle. Don't tell me. I can't get the handle past the deflector. I gotta take that off again. Son of a gun. This thing has just been... It's been a rough go with this guy. Rough go. And now the fitting. Yeah, that's right. You just saw the proper use of a combination wrench. Run it down with this and then tighten it with that so you don't break that. Got it? Moment of truth. Let's go test it. It's night. We're in my garage, so it's messy. Don't judge me. I have no idea if this is going to work or not. I figured I'll leave the test to do on video so you can catch the look of abject failure or unmitigated success. So we're going to know right away if I fix the original problem, we plug in the hose, because the original problem was it plugged in and just ran. So we'll see if that fixed that part at least. Hang on a second. My fingers don't work right. I'm just getting air coming out through the exhaust. There's nothing going past the valve at all. I don't know. I'm very, very, very disappointed. The amount of time that it took to go through this has been prohibitive. And I don't know what to do next. Well, when I play with the directional controls, it's the original problem. When I turn it the other way, it goes away. So I clearly have misdiagnosis. Man, I just want to chuck this thing right now through a window. But well, we'll see. Such are the trials of trying some new stuff yourself. You're going to win some and lose some, and I clearly lost bad on this one. So the next steps are I can either continue to wrangle with this or send it off to our repair facility and have them take a look at it, which is what I think I'm going to do. I simply have run out of time with this. Quite honestly, I've run out of patience. So I'm going to leave this to someone who knows these models way better than I do and send this off to the technicians at Power Tool Repair and have them fix it. So I got to eat what I put into it. I'll never get the time back or the parts, but hey, you know, it's a learning process, and that's the cost of learning. And the best lessons are expensive ones, although this wasn't terribly expensive, but I'm going to have to eat the repair on it when I send it off because I already quoted the customer. So what's fair is fair. We'll stand by what we quoted them, and that's what they'll get charged, even if the actual repair costs us more, which it most assuredly will. But that's just the way it goes. So, you saw a failure here. But keep watching the channel because you'll see a couple of other successes with Ingersoll 2235 Ti Max, half-inch air impacts, one with a trigger issue and the other with a screw and gasket issue. Those were solved successfully. So watch those if you want to see something uplifting, or if you just want to continue to laugh at my pain, because I know if you fix anything for a living, you know how this feels. And it's a kick in the gut, especially when you spent so much time with this. But hey, that's the way it goes. So anyway, keep watching the channel and look at those two other air tool repair videos. And we've got some really cool new stuff coming down the line, including a shop tour with my friend Cass Nichols and my other friend Robert Whitley, who have teamed up together to open a shop of their own. So you're not gonna want to miss that. So do me a favor, click down here to subscribe so you don't miss any of it. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, use a tool. Don't be one.